Oh, hello. Welcome to my studio. Since we're here, let's talk about subtractive drawing. So subtractive drawing is a way to move away from line in your drawing, which is kind of how we all are taught to draw and write to begin with, and to look more towards relationships of shape and form and tone, things like that. So, whether you're making something that's realistic or abstract, that kind of mindset can be very beneficial. So we're going to make a simple drawing today, and you'll need a few tools for it. You'll obviously need a pencil. Number 2 pencil or an HB pencil will do. If you have, a drawing kit, if you're using a number 2 pencil, you'll have an eraser already kind of built into your pencil. That works just fine. If you have a drawing kit, you can use a white plastic eraser. This is the standard white plastic eraser. These are good, tough erasers that get rid of stuff pretty aggressively. And you might want to, if you don't already have one, invest in one of these retractable erasers. So it's a white plastic eraser just like this one, but in this kind of retractable kind of housing, which is great for detail work, more control. And since we're going to be using erasing as a way to create form or shape rather than just getting rid of things like we normally reserve erasing for, something like this is really helpful to give you that kind of deliberate touch. You'll also want something to blend with. A cotton cloth works great, an old t-shirt, that kind of thing. If you have a tortillon, if you have a drawing kit, again, you probably have some of these, just like a little kind of newsprint kind of twisty thing that's rolled up and helps you kind of spread graphite on the paper. And of course you'll need paper and a place to draw in. So let's check out this drawing right here. So we're going to start by giving ourselves kind of an area within which to tone, and that area is going to be in the shape of a rectangle. So you're going to want to start with a very faint, doesn't have to be perfect, kind of outline of this rectangle. And then what we'll do is fill that rectangle in with our pencil. Use the side of the pencil's tip. Don't point. Use the side. Keep your pencil parallel to your paper. And I'm trying to keep, the pressure consistent, so I'll get, kind of a consistent gray. We're going to blend all this, so this does not have to be perfect. It can be kind of like a messy, scrawly kind of thing. What you don't want are giant gaps, big areas of white. Otherwise, it can just be pretty freewheeling. Okay, I'm going to grab my cloth, and I'm going to press pretty hard to smudge all this graphite together, especially in the areas where I pressed a little too hard to begin with. And this doesn't have to be perfect either, just like the edges of the rectangle don't have to be perfect and all the marks don't have to be perfect. This is just a way to get some tone on your paper. I'm going to make it a little bit darker. Let's go over it one more time. And then one more pass with the cloth. Pretty good. All right, so we're going to clean up the edges a little bit. Try to think of it like this. Rather than just erasing with our eraser, we're going to be shaping this blob into a rectangle. So getting into that mindset of not thinking of erasing as a way to get rid of things, especially not to get rid of mistakes, but more as a way to deliberately shape things or to reveal things, is going to be a really awesome way to, really get your head into the big picture kind of view that all of us artist types need and use when we're making our stuff. So got rid of those little excess kind of foggy bits, and now we have a bit more of a rectangle. Now inside of this rectangle, we're gonna remove some graphite into very specific shapes, and the end result is going to be a simple but understandable kind of image. While you're doing this, what you really want to do is look at the shapes you're making, how they kind of appear in terms of symmetry from edge to edge, side to side, things like that, but also how they interact with one another once we start removing other shapes. That interaction between shape and shape is going to be an essential part of the drawing, and really will get you into the mindset again of big picture kind of thinking, how all the parts kind of line up with one another, communicate with one another to express a whole. So what I've made here is a trapezoid. I have removed the kind of area in this shape towards the bottom of my paper. And when I'm looking at this, I want to make sure these edges are nice and kind of consistent. I want to make sure the top is a nice kind of horizontal kind of top. And I want to make sure these bottom right and left hand parts of the gray are about the same width. So you want to kind of split your thought between thinking of this as a white shape in front of a gray background, as well as thinking of it as a gray shape with like a little kind of like white kind of like tunnel or something kind of poking through it. So I think that if I'm looking at these two and I want these to be similar, that this one is smaller than that one. So I'm going to shave a little bit off of this right here. Looks pretty good. And I think, this edge could use a little touch up. So I'm just going to kind of sharpen it up a little bit. And then same thing on my top here. I think this top part could be a little more kind of straight. Pretty good. All right, now the next shape I'm going to reveal is a triangle. This triangle will be floating above. There'll be a kind of a space between this triangle and this trapezoid. The bottom, of course, is going to be horizontal. While I'm removing the beginning part of this triangle, I want to make sure that this edge and this edge, because now I have these two edges of this gray shape, are consistent, meaning that they're parallel. So this needs to be as horizontal as the one on the bottom down here. I'm going to now remove the left and right hand sides of my triangle, roughly, and then I'm going to take a look at it and see what I need to fix up. So what I want from this is this new edge that I have revealed of gray on white to be consistent with this edge of gray meeting up with white on the bottom. I want it to appear as if, if I placed a ruler or a straight edge or whatever on those lines, those edges, that they would match up. One wouldn't stick out further than the other. So I'm going to grab a little straight edge, pencil, check them out. Not too bad. I think maybe this could just be straightened out a little bit, or kind of finessed a little bit, if you will. Same thing here on the right. Now that one's obviously got some problems they need to fix up. So yeah, it's curved. So I'm going to erase that little curve out. And again, what I'm doing is I'm kind of aiming for this line. And a little trick you can use to help you with this is, hold your eraser above the line, the edge that you want to kind of find up here, float your eraser above it, and then kind of trace it, continue that angle, and then wherever it kind of guides you up to the top part is where you're going to have to kind of erase out your new kind of gray zone. Same thing here. Not bad. So now, again, we're looking at it a few different ways. Two shapes, a white triangle floating above a white trapezoid with a gray background, or a big gray kind of angled shape up here with a bar that comes across with some white space behind it. Which leads us to the last aspect of this drawing, which is going to be a shape that looks a little something like this. That's going to be up here. We're going to take the large eraser and we're just going to get rid of some large areas, like most of the top part of the drawing. And like we did with all this consistency down here, I'm going to shape this new contour to make sure that its edges are parallel to the edges on the inside and consistent in that way. So what I'm going for is a consistent width, basically. I want this to be as wide as this, as wide as this. So while I'm erasing, I always keep the model, if you will, the right-hand side, in my line of sight. So I can check what I'm doing on the left, what I'm erasing, what I'm revealing up against what's on the right. All right, so it's a little rough, but what we have in the end here is an uppercase silhouette of the letter A. So you have made this by focusing on the spaces kind of between and around the letter form rather than how we normally do things, instead of just writing the A using line, separating A from space, or if you're going to make it into a shape, something kind of like that. What we've done is focused on these areas and remove them with a heightened sensitivity to how they all interact with one another and come together to communicate the letter A to us. This is a method I use in my drawings and paintings all the time. You can see here we've got kind of a large graphite drawing entirely made with this subtractive method to create different values, different shapes, different forms, as well as different textures, including line, tree bark, grass, things like that. All made by removing rather than adding. And this is certainly something I do when I paint. This is a painting that is in kind of like a middle ground stage. I'm still working on it. But when I make my paintings and drawings, I'm always aware of how the shapes of things are created by removing the background or shaping the physical things in the foreground with the background, if that makes sense. A good example is this little spot right here. When I made this part of the painting, I looked at it two ways, both as an area of empty space, kind of to peer through, but I also looked at these two things as shapes that were just this kind of like light green color, and how those shapes interacted with one another to work with the overall picture of movement and texture in the painting. So that's a little kind of foray into looking at the importance of the interactions of empty and filled spaces, and maybe kind of getting outside of your comfort zone in terms of how you're drawing or painting, and not thinking about adding all the time, thinking maybe about the spaces between and around things and how they may be important as well. Thanks.